welcome back, everyone, to Authors on the Air. Today, I am thrilled to have my friend Carl Vonderau with us. Carl, welcome to Authors on the Air.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
I know, and I'm so glad that we got to see each other last year in San Diego. At least we got a chance to talk then. And
Yeah.
but today I want to talk about both of your books. I have Murderabilia and Saving Myles here,
Okay.
and first of all, I want to say I enjoyed both of them very much, and I know that you're getting a lot of a respect from the critics and readers alike. You've been nominated and won a couple of awards. Congratulations!
Thank you. Thank you.
How does it feel after your first book, after your first big published book, Murderabilia, to have been recognized with an award?
That was kind of unexpected. And the award and the way it happened was it was at Left Coast Crime, and it was here in San Diego. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've been nominated for an award. Then we go to the conference, and after one day, the conference is canceled because of COVID. So I thought, well, I guess I'm not going to win anything, but it was done virtually, and then I ended up winning the award for the debut, which was a thrill for me. So that was great.
Congratulations. I happen to know, and in reading a little bit about you, that you started writing at a very young age.
Yeah,
And you started writing scary stories and kind of putting the
yeah,
fear of bejesus into your friends and family.
I did. I liked horror stories then. And actually in third grade, I wrote a story about germs taking over the world and how the world was unfair to them. And my third grade teacher wrote to my mother and she said, well, clever, but rather morbid. And I thought that was great because I had no idea what morbid meant.
So, germs taking over the world, yes, that probably has happened,
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But we're treating them poorly. I don't know about that. So in the back of your third grade mind, you always knew that you wanted to write somehow. And so
Yeah.
you did, right? You continued
Eventually, yeah,
writing.
I wrote in high school, and in high school I was a musician as well. So I was trying to be, the next Paul Simon. I played classical guitar and, wrote songs and all of that. So I concentrated my creativity on that and through college, really. It wasn't until after college and after I sort of gave up trying to do that that I started concentrating on writing fiction.
So do you still play classical guitar?
I don't. I don't. You just run out of time. And I found in my life that in order to get good in something new, you have to give up something. Plus, I was frustrated with the instrument, and I didn't have the technique or the ear really to be a great classical guitarist. So,
Oh,
or
well, sometimes you
or
got to play
writer.
for yourself, though. So,
Yeah, that's
well,
true. That's
but
true.
you found another, you went back to your original creative pursuit and now you're
Yep.
writing. Um, so, but the interesting thing to me is that you went into banking,
Yeah.
which is so, I mean, talk about a right brain difference.
Yeah.
But you were very creative in that you were in anti-money laundering. Is that correct?
Well, I wasn't in that when I was in banking. I did other things. I didn't really learn about the money laundering until I pretty much when I wrote this book, except some things I had learned on the job in banking. I did international banking and did a lot of financing imports and exports and that kind of thing. So that's where I learned about that. But I'd always wanted to be a writer, right? And I took some classes to be a writer then. And I didn't tell anyone at the banks what I was doing because I just didn't think that would help my career.
Where have you lived in your life as a banker?
I started out in Chicago, and I spoke, some languages. So I did a lot of work and consulting work, 2, 3 weeks at a time in Latin America, in Venezuela, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, and then we moved to Montreal. My wife got offered a teaching position at McGill, so I learned French there and joined some banks. And for a while, I was working at a French-speaking bank handling Latin America. So that was fun because, you got to speak several languages at the same time.
Do you have a knack for learning languages,
I do.
Carl?
I do. I'm more auditory than visual. It's funny because my sister and my mother were both really good watercolor painters. So I always tell people they got the eye and I got the ear.
Well, it sounds like the creative gene is running in your family. Are there other creatives? Are there other creative Vonderos, by the way?
Not that I know of. Well, yeah, excuse me. I should. My sister is still a very accomplished watercolor painter, and she shows in galleries. So she has done that for a long time, and my mother was too. But my family was pretty traditional, and they didn't really want me to do this. They wanted me to be in business like my
They
father.
wanted you to put money in the bank for your
Mm.
retirement. They didn't want you, I know creatives have such a hard time. I have a nephew who is studying for a Broadway show right now. And
Yeah,
thank God he's very smart. He, went through college with a 4.0 average. He actually is a tutor when he's not, uh,
yeah.
rehearsing. So, yeah,
So
we always think that being a creative is, it's not the way to go, but boy, sure does fill your soul, doesn't it?
it does. It does. And, my parents, I got an economics degree at Stanford. So I was studying at Stanford, but I studied abroad in Colombia for a year. My parents came to visit me in Bogota, and we went to see this movie on Lenny Bruce. And then afterwards we went out to dinner and I told them, I've always wanted to perform as a musician in bars, etc. I think when I graduate, what I want to do is be a performer in bars. I mean, how stupid could you be after watching a movie about Lenny Bruce?
Lenny Bruce was right. The big success story. And he
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
was until he wasn't, right?
Yeah, so and my mother, she was a very staunch Christian Scientist, and they believe that, bad thoughts will make you sick and kill you. So, I ran the risk of making my mother physically sick because what I had told her what I wanted to do. I thought they were going to have a stroke right there.
Well, I
So,
will say that my niece also went to Stanford and then had got her law degree from UCLA.
yeah,
My brother did an internship at Universidad Los Andes. So
okay.
we kind of have a lot of overlap here with,
We do.
yeah, he went specifically to learn Spanish and stayed
Okay.
with the Spanish family. So
Yeah,
my niece and nephew and are trilingual, and my brother and his
yeah,
wife are bilingual, very much so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and you speak some Spanish too, right?
well, I grew up in Miami. It's hard not to speak
Mm,
Spanish when you grow up in Miami.
yeah,
Since I now live on the west coast of Florida, I've lost a lot of it.
yeah.
I mean, I could get by if I had to. I'd probably be saying something really rude if I really tried to have a conversation.
Well, that's half the fun.
Yeah, thank you, Google Translate.
Yeah. Well, but sometimes it just doesn't work. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, it's true.
I learned
Go,
French and I went to Montreal and there were these two women. I was in a bank and these two women in the conference room in the bank. And I wanted to say, excuse me for bothering you. And I thought, well, the verb has to be the same in Spanish like that. It's molestar in Spanish. And I end up saying, excuse me for molesting you.
Perfect.
Excusez-moi pour vous molester.
if if you weren't writing thrillers, I could point you in a direction for rom coms or something. That is too
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Um,
But I was
oh goodness
American, so
gracious!
I could get away with anything.
So my limited Spanish now comes from when I just say Google Translate into Spanish, and I'll hold up my phone to someone. Um,
Yeah.
I live right next door to the Minnesota Twins training stadium, and
Okay.
so literally they could throw a baseball over into the apartment complex where I live, and I actually got T-boned by one of the players
Oh,
from Dominican Republic.
yeah.
He was one of the pitchers.
Yeah.
So he didn't speak any English at all, and my Spanish was pretty rusty from not being over in Miami. But somehow he just kept saying, I didn't see the stop sign. I'm a pitcher for the Twins. And, I had to translate to him that you stop no matter what and let the other guy go by. He didn't have a driver's license. It wasn't
Oh,
his car
wow.
that he was driving. The guy
Yeah.
that did own the car wanted to deny that he loaned it to him. Oh, what a
Oh
nightmare.
my gosh.
But eventually all these things, and this is just the joy of living in Florida. You don't need a
Yeah,
whole lot of
yeah.
inspiration. You just have to live here.
You just absorb it.
You just absorb. It's by osmosis these things happen. I want to talk
Yeah.
about Murderabilia. This book
Okay.
is written in first person. And
Yes.
so, was it hard for you to write in first person because Saving Miles is not?
Actually, it was easier, and that's what I always wrote in before Saving Miles.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And first person is the easiest one to write in, and it's also the most difficult because it tends to get self-indulgent, and people tend to go too far into their own minds. But I wrote that one in first person. Yeah.
It actually suits the story because it's the father telling the story about his son and his estranged wife. And, you've used a lot of your banking knowledge in this book too. So I really enjoyed this. It really isn't that big of a read, it's 365 pages. So I could read this in a day and then went back and read it the second time in a day. And enjoyed it even more the second time around. So, will you give our audience a little synopsis about what happens? And I want to say ahead of time for those of you listening and watching, Carl always starts with all his books involve a family. You always you always have a family, and it's interesting the dynamic of the family and how important it is to you. Take the stage and tell us about Murderabilia.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll give you the one sentence pitch that won me an agent on this book. So, um, it's about a banker for the very wealthy whose life is torn apart when he's accused of being a serial killer like his father. So those are the family dynamics, several generations. What is it like to be the child of a serial killer? To me, what was most interesting about writing this book was not the serial killer, but the effect on the children and on the marriage. And so, it's about a guy at a bank, and when he was very young, when he was 8, his father was arrested for being a serial killer in Illinois. He had no idea. His family didn't know. His mother moved them all to California, changed their name, and they never told anyone who this man was. And he's in prison in Illinois. So now the banker has grown up. He's got his own kids. He hasn't told them. He's told his wife. And then one day, his wife's colleague is killed in the same manner his father would do it. And all the evidence points to the banker that's tried to escape all this. And the killings are just the way his father would do it. The only way he can solve this crime is to go back and see the father he hasn't seen for 30 years and try and figure it out.
Carl, have you ever spoken to someone who had a serial killer as a relative?
I have not. I have not. I've spoken to someone who had a killer as a relative, and I did a lot of research on it. Like Melissa
I'm sorry.
Moore was this
Mhm.
daughter of BTK. Was it BTK or Green River Killer? Um,
Well, he was
no, it
Rivera,
was
wasn't he? Yeah.
no, it was. Let's see, it was Carrie Rawson, who was the daughter of BTK. Melissa River was the daughter of the Green River Killer,
Right.
and they've. Melissa wrote a book. I read that. I read all kinds of descriptions about children of serial killers. I looked at Carrie Rawson as well, and she's talked a lot about it. Um, I looked at the children of Charlie Manson, 3 of them. He had three sons. One of them committed suicide. Um, Ted Bundy had a daughter. Nobody knows who she is or where she is.
Good for
But
her. Yeah.
yeah, Absolutely. I
Carl,
mean,
I went to junior high and high school with a guy who was a serial killer here in Florida.
really.
His ex-wife and I are still very good friends.
Oh, wow.
It, it's such a strange story. And one day when we're not talking and we have more time, I'll tell you all about it.
Oh, I'd love to
But
hear that.
yeah, yeah, and she does interviews. I talked her into going and telling her story. She
Yeah.
said it was very cathartic for her.
Oh,
Um,
good.
your next book is Saving Miles, and
Yeah.
again, this is centered around a family whose son falls off the wagon there. He just steps on the wrong side of the tracks. I love the premise of this story, but you did a lot of research on a very important topic. So let's hear your synopsis and then let's move on to what you learned while you were researching this book.
Okay. Well, I learned a lot of things from researching that book.
I
But
bet
the
you did.
synopsis is um, two parents have had a very difficult time raising their son, and it's been so hard that it's blown the marriage apart. And at one point, the mother finds OxyContin hidden in the son's closet. So they have to do something drastic because their son is 16 years old. And they have to save his life, even against his will. So they send him by force to a residential treatment center. And when he comes back a year later, he's seemingly totally changed, getting straight A's in school. Then he sneaks off to Mexico with a girl, tries to do a drug deal, and gets kidnapped. Now, the parents don't have any more money anymore. They spend it all in this residential treatment center. So the father has no choice but to get involved with a kind of sketchy bank whose owner has all kinds of contacts in Mexico and will loan him the money for the ransom. And the mother, she works for this man's nonprofit as well. But once he gets in that bank, he realizes there's a lot of things going on there.
I have a friend whose son became involved with, uh, I guess it was methamphetamine or
Yeah,
fentanyl or something, whatever it is. Meth is the
yeah.
thing they smoke, right? So,
No, it's OxyContin in this book.
okay.
Yeah,
I get stoned from
yeah,
aspirin.
well, yeah,
But anyway, for years, they tried to help the son in and out of programs and everything. There actually is a very good one is very close to where I live, but it's not for kids; it's for adults.
yeah, yeah,
And you got to have a lot of money to go. A lot,
yeah.
$10,000 a month minimum to go.
Minimum. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they drained their accounts. He relapsed.
Oh,
Said he
wow.
would go back again, relapse again. I think he relapsed like 5 times, and after
Yeah,
a while, he had to say, "I can't do this anymore." It was putting such a strain on the other members besides his wife, he and his wife, the daughter, and the grandkids now. So, they said, "We have no more to give you. It's up to you to
yeah,
do it." I
yeah,
don't know if is that the right, I mean, I know tough love.
yeah.
How do you not support your kid? So, what did you find out in your research?
Well, first of all, I didn't have him be an addict because I didn't want it to be about addiction, this book. He was just on the verge. He was dealing this stuff and he was on the verge of using. So I didn't deal with that. But there are a lot of parents who can't help their kids anymore. The kids are beyond them. So they will send them to wilderness programs or residential treatment centers. And these places are all over the country. I mean, I read an article in the New York Times where this person estimated 100,000 kids are in these programs a year. And uh, and you're a parent, you have to save your kid's life. You'll do whatever it takes. But once you get there, these kids are totally isolated. And what they do, it's tough love, it's behavior modification on steroids. They Many of these programs break them down, take away all their triggers, and then try and build them up with the right behaviors so that they can be successful in life. But it borders on psychological abuse. They're
And I'm sure
very
on physical abuse too at some
and
point.
physical abuse too. There have been lots of cases of sexual abuse. I mean, these kids are teenagers, right? And a lot of the staff is in their 20s with huge amount of power. It's just a cauldron ripe for abuse.
Hmm.
And many of them been closed down. A lot of these kids come back and they'll never forgive their parents, for sending them there, for banishing them.
Hmm.
Um, and they are now have a much more sophisticated way to manipulate their parents, and they go back to the kinds of behaviors they had before. Some of them, it changes their lives. It really works for some of them, and they end up, living lives of success.
Did you
Um,
find in your research that was there any program that was successful?
I don't know. I couldn't tell. I could, well, I mean, most of them have successful kids that have come out of it. And these are the ones that give the testimonies to people who are considering their programs. But even some of the most successful ones, one was very successful and it was closed down for two counselors charged with sexual abuse. You know,
Yeah.
and they're
What's
authorized.
what's a parent to do?
Well, you don't know because your communication is very limited because you're considered a trigger for your kid's behavior. So you have very controlled, maybe weekly or monthly telephone calls, and the minute the kid gets negative, they cut it off.
Yeah.
And they go through various levels in the program, or you know, so how do you
From
know?
from deprivation to then carrot and stick, right?
Yes, yes. So they earn rewards and they get more and more freedom, and some um that it's mind changing, right?
I bet. I bet. What are you working on now?
I'm working on one more book in the banking industry, but this one takes place in the retail branch, the people that deal day to day with walk-in customers. And in this case, it's a father who's lost his wife to COVID and he's trying very much to recover from it. And the woman he's kind of attracted to, but he can't let himself fall in love again. He goes to see her and she's died from a seeming drug overdose. And he has to find out what really happened. And he
Hmm.
resurrects his wife and learns how to love again in the process.
How about that? Are you
Yeah.
ready to play five quick questions and five quick answers?
Uh-oh. I guess so.
Whose book is on your nightstand?
Well, I'm reading some books that I'm having to I'm going to be reviewing and talking with them about. So those are on my nightstand, like um, Odyssey's End. I read that was very good. Matt
Oh my
Coyle.
gosh, of course. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's really good. I've read Sanctuary Motel by Alan Orloff, who is
Yep.
out where you are, and he's got
Yep.
very sympathetic characters. I am about to read The Lockbox, or I'm starting it, and I'm going to be interviewing the author there, Parker, in March. So I'm doing that one. But a book I read again a week ago because I gave a course on emotion in thrillers was Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried. Have you read
Yes.
it? I mean, that's a
Yes.
masterpiece. It's a
It's
wonderful.
wonderful. I read across genres, so and
Yeah.
about 400 books a year because I don't have a television.
Oh my
So
God. Yeah.
yeah,
You're
so
faster than
it's
I am.
well, you have a life other than I live with cats and have no TV. What can I tell you, Carl?
Yeah.
Speaking of cats or dogs,
Dogs.
okay, what's your
Well, I'm
favorite food?
allergic to cats. My son has a cat.
You can
What
have
does that
there's
tell you?
the Sphinx and there are other kinds. I don't have any, that doesn't wash with me. You take an
Okay.
allergy. My son-in-law is deathly allergic. He still comes over. He says, "Mom, I'm going to do this for you." And I said, "Okay, your allergy." What's your favorite food?
Probably Indian.
Really?
Yeah,
How
I love Indian
fantastic.
food.
Oh, I
Yeah,
do too. I do too.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm. What's
yeah.
the best thing anybody ever told you about being a writer? The best of the worst.
Hmm. Well, okay, so the best is, some of the reviews have been really nice, and that I had a real gift for character and for pacing. So that those have been great. Oh, and Matt Coyle called it a masterpiece. He called Saving Miles a masterpiece. Oh my God, you know. Whew. So that was great. Probably the worst thing was my first agent I had for almost a year out of New York, and he kept looking over, well-known person. He kept looking over Murderabilia, what became it. And after a year, he hadn't sent it out to anyone. And he said, I don't think I'm the agent for you. And I want you to know in my 10 years in the business, I've only done this to 3 people.
Well, what did he know? It's a fantastic book, and you won an award for it, and you've been in the newspapers for it, big fool. So
Well, thank
my
you.
my
Thank
final
you.
question is, who is your literary or your writing hero?
I don't know. I like various books. Um, like Tim O'Brien is kind of a hero, like I mentioned before. John le Carre, because who else can do a con man with a heart? I mean,
Yeah.
it's impossible, but he does
I'm
it.
gonna give you a book recommendation. I want you to read
Okay.
The Lemon Man by Keith
Okay.
Bruton.
Okay.
The Lemon Man,
Yeah.
Keith Bruton, Bruton. Um,
Okay.
it was one of the best. It was one of the most humorous murder books I've ever read. It's not that big, but it's a great book, and you'll get a kick out of it.
Okay.
He's a hitman with OCD, and his goes when the story opens, he rides his bike all over. He goes to
Hit me rides a bike. You got me already.
he lives in Ireland, so or yeah, Ireland.
Okay.
So anyway, he goes to the apartment and does the hit on the guy, and then here's a baby crying, an infant crying in the next room. The place is a total pigsty. So he
Yeah.
takes the baby,
Yeah.
and therein the story goes. It is one of the best books I've read. As a matter of fact, it was our humorous uh, thriller of the year this past year. So if you like that kind of wacky stuff, you're going to love this book. It was great. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanna read that, or maybe I'll
So
listen to it.
when will your new book come out?
Um, I'm doing the final revisions on it. I gave it to my agent. She had some comments, and one of my problems is I'm a perfectionist, and so I've been going over it for 4 months, but it's almost there. It's within about 2 weeks. So it'll go to her, and then my publisher Ocean View has an option on it,
Great.
so we'll see what happens.
Fantastic. I wish you all the best. Where can we find you on the web?
I'm on Facebook. I've got 2 accounts on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I don't use X or Twitter. So I've decided not to do that. I also have a website, and I have a newsletter. And in my newsletter, I've taken to every month, I will give you a strange story about a fraud that happened somewhere.
Oh, that well, I'm going to sign up then. It's carlvonderau.com, correct?
Right, right,
It
right.
has been a pleasure to see you again. I'm glad we
Uh,
finally had a chance to
oh,
talk.
me too. This was
Anyone you want to
fun.
give a shout out to?
Just whoever is listening, thank you. Thank you. And
There you go.
you can do me a real favor and buy the book.
There
You
we
don't even
can.
have to read it, just buy
There, just buy.
it.
Saving Miles is the newest one.
Yeah,
Murderabilia is the first one. I recommend them highly. Both of them are excellent books. You will be deeply engrossed as soon as you get started on them. Carl,
well,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much. I hope I see you at
Thank
a
you.
conference again soon, or you'll come back and maybe sit behind the microphone and interview somebody you want.
Okay, well, thank you. Love to do that.
You're
All
welcome.
right.
All
All
right.
right. All right.